You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat what doesn't belong to them. For months, I watched her. The self-proclaimed HOA president, using my private bridge like it was her driveway. At first, it was harmless. A shortcut. Then one morning I saw something that made my heart stop. A massive cement truck rolled across my wooden bridge, boards bending, bolts screaming, water spraying beneath. And behind the wheel, the truck driver was waving to Karen, who stood smugly at the end of the lane, arms crossed, watching the damage happen like she owned the place. That's when I realized, this wasn't carelessness, it was a challenge, and I was done being quiet. 2. I built that bridge myself. Every nail, every plank. It connected my farmhouse to the county road, and it wasn't public property. I even paid for a steel sign that read, "Private Bridge." No heavy vehicles. But ever since Karen moved in across the creek, she made it her mission to improve community access. Her words, not mine. She claimed the bridge, connected the HOA neighborhood to her favorite shortcut, meaning she could shave 2 minutes off her commute. I'd confronted her once, politely. She smiled, fake and sweet, and said, "Well, if you wanted privacy, you shouldn't have built something so convenient." The next morning, I found tire tracks deeper than usual and a fresh crack in one of the support beams. By the 3rd week, the bridge had scars, broken planks, crushed edges, loose bolts. But the worst part wasn't the damage, it was the arrogance. Karen started sending contractors over, cement trucks, garden suppliers, even a landscaping crew that claimed. Karen said we could cross. Each time I chased them off, another would appear days later. She wasn't using my bridge anymore. She was showing that she could. Neighbors started whispering, "Don't mess with her." One said, "She knows people at the county." I didn't care who she knew. This wasn't about power. It was about respect, for property, for boundaries, for what's right. And then came the day that changed everything. The morning light was perfect, golden, sharp, cutting through the mist over the creek. I was tightening bolts on one of the side rails when I heard that deep mechanical growl. Not a pickup, not a van, something heavier. I turned, and there it was. Another cement truck. I waved my hands, shouting across the creek, "Stop!" But the driver just pointed behind him. And there she was again. Karen, in her sun hat, holding a clipboard, filming me like I was the one causing trouble. The truck's tires hit the bridge. The wood screamed under the weight. A plank splintered. My stomach dropped as I felt the vibration in my boots. That bridge was seconds away from snapping. I yelled louder, "Get off the bridge!" The driver finally braked halfway across, sweating, unsure. Karen shouted from behind him, "It's fine. He's overreacting." She actually waved her hand like she was conducting traffic. 2. When it was over, the bridge sagged visibly in the middle. One support beam cracked clean through. The driver apologized, promised to report it, and left. Karen, though, she walked right past me. "You really should have built something sturdier if you didn't want people using it," she said. And that was it. That one sentence. That smug tone. That careless smirk that told me she thought there would never be consequences. That night, I stood by the creek, staring at the bridge in the moonlight. Every plank I'd built, every nail I'd hammered, disrespected like it meant nothing. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. If she wanted to keep testing that bridge, I was going to make sure the next test was one she'd never forget. Not dangerous, not illegal, but poetic. I started sketching a plan. A trap that wouldn't hurt anyone, but would make one thing very, very clear. This bridge was not hers. And when she'd try to cross it again, in broad daylight, with her next cement truck, her clipboard, and that same arrogant smile, she'd realize. She walked straight into it. I didn't want to fight. I wanted one clear, undeniable record. Proof people could see and believe. So I stopped thinking like a homeowner and started acting like someone who knew how to build a case. First, I called the county bridge inspector. I told him everything: the trucks, the cracked beam, the date and time of the worst crossing. He didn't promise anything grand, just a calm, "We'll take a look." 2 days later, he came with a clipboard and a hard hat, walked across my bridge, tapped the wood, checked bolts, and wrote notes. He left a printed temporary notice nailed to a post. Unsafe for heavy vehicles. Temporary restriction. County inspection pending. I took a photo of it and posted it on the neighborhood group with a short message. County posted restriction. Please respect private property. The next, I called the catering of chaos the big suppliers who'd been driving over my bridge. I didn't shout. I told them plainly their crossings were unsafe and that the county was watching. One driver, the cement company dispatcher, actually laughed until I said, "I've got an inspector on my porch right now." He stopped laughing fast, checked his log, and agreed to forward a company notice to every driver who serviced that route. Then I knocked on doors. I asked neighbors for two things: to keep cameras rolling, and to stand with me if a truck showed up. Some were eager. Others were nervous. A few said nothing. The ones who came brought their phones, their porch cameras, and their curiosity. They weren't here to start trouble. They were here because they were tired of watching someone treat one man's work like a playground. That weekend, I set the stage. I hung a new sign by the road: big, simple, official looking pride no high afel east ve tar spuller party eid. I put a small camera on a tree facing the lane, and another pointing straight at the bridge. I put the inspector's temporary notice where everyone could see it. I posted the photo in the neighborhood chat, time-stamped, clear and impossible to ignore. I also did something else. I called the local news tip line. I don't like cameras on me, but I don't mind a camera when it catches disrespect in action. The reporter listened and said, "If there's an inspector notice and vehicles keep crossing, that's news." She promised to send a producer. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone for the thrill. I wanted evidence. I wanted an official record that showed a pattern of behavior, not just a rumor. The trap wasn't a trap that hurt anyone. It was a trap that let truth show itself, bright and embarrassing. On Monday morning, at 9, a cement truck rolled down the lane. The driver hadn't noticed the new sign. The lane looked the same as every other morning, shiny under the sun. But Karen did. She came into view in her garden, hands on her hips, and watched like she timed this test herself. I stood behind my camera cluster, heart pounding but steady. Neighbors lined their driveways. Phones up. The inspector parked his pickup nearby, helmet under his arm, and the reporter's cameraman set up at the far end of the road. The truck stopped at the edge of my property. The driver climbed down, squinted at the sign, and his face shifted from routine to uneasy. He radioed his dispatcher. I heard snippets. "Sign there. County notice, what if she says?" That was when Karen stepped out, crisp and deliberate, in her sun hat and a new dress she probably thought was perfect for a confrontation. She strode up the lane, clipboard in hand, and smiled at the driver like a general greeting a foot soldier. She said loudly, so everyone could hear, "I'm Karen Wilcox, HOA president. We've got permits. You can cross. Go ahead." The driver looked at his ID out and was walking toward Karen. "Sir, the county posted restrictions," the inspector said, blunt and calm. "This is unsafe." Karen lifted her chin. "That's ridiculous. We've used this bridge for years. We're allowed." The inspector held up his clipboard. "The county has documented structural concerns. We'll have repairs scheduled. Until then, no heavy vehicles." Karen glanced at the cameras, gave that thin smile that meant, "You think you can stop me?" She bent, picked up a pebble, tossed it at the sign, as if to test whether the warning meant anything. It landed at the foot of the post. The cameras caught the motion like a slow, quiet confession. Then she did the thing I'd expected, and hoped would happen. She loudly called the cement truck driver useless, cowardly. And then she did what she did best. She tried to shame people into inaction. "You're holding up progress," she said. "You're blocking community access." The driver, sweating and nervous, was about to obey her, to do the shortcut she wanted, when a voice crackled from the cement company dispatcher over his radio. "Do not cross. Company policy, no unauthorized crossings where county posted unsafe. We'll cancel the job if you cross." He hesitated. Karen's face tightened. She turned to the inspector and the reporter like a boxer choosing the next move. "You're making this into something it's not. I can see who's been spreading rumors." By then, the street had filled. A neighbor shouted from the porch, "Sir, we have video." Another neighbor walked forward with an older woman who had owned the lane for 30 years. She nodded toward the inspector and said, "Loud enough for the cameraman. He built that bridge. He paid for it. Karen's mask faltered. She wasn't expecting allies. She'd expected either silence or fear. Instead, she had witnesses. A county notice, a company that wouldn't risk liability, and a reporter who was dialing her editor. Her next move was classic Karen-y. She called the HOA board on speakerphone and started demanding action. Name, dropping members and calling people cowards. Bureaucrats. The lawyerly tone she used when calling people at length had no place now. Those calls were just noise. The inspector and the dispatcher were clear the trucks would not cross. Seeing the plan collapse, Karen pivoted. She stomped her foot, then turned to the camera and dropped her voice to the kind of sly, performative tone she used in meetings. Everyone's overreacting. This is petty. I will not be bullied by one man. That sentence pushed the neighborhood from whisper to anger. People picked up their phones and started live streaming. The reporter's cameraman zoomed in on Karen's face. The badge she always wore on her collar, the clipboard, the way she tried to control the narrative. The cement truck sat quiet, its engine purring like a restrained beast. Finally, the driver climbed back in, shut the door, and pulled away. He didn't cross. He didn't even argue. The company didn't want the liability. They left, but not before the reporter asked the driver one question. Did anyone ask you to cross despite the sign? He shook his head. No. We got told not to. When the dust settled, Karen stood alone at the end of the lane, framed by the green trees and the bright, indifferent sky. Her eyes narrowed. She had tried to force the day to bend to her will and found it wouldn't. The neighborhood group chat lit up with screenshots, timestamps, and messages. The inspector emailed his preliminary report. The company sent a written refusal to cross where the county had posted concerns. The reporter said she'd run the piece if any further crossing occurred. And if it did, she'd send a crew. I walked down the lane and stood near Karen, not to gloat but to state the obvious. You can't use it, I said. Not now. Not while it's unsafe. When it's fixed, fine. Until then, respect the sign. She lifted her chin and walked back to her house with the same step she'd used to walk past my bridge the first time. But she wasn't smiling. The day had shifted. The cameras had shifted it. At sunset, when the light turned golden soft, I sat on my porch and watched the bridge under the trees. It sagged where it was hurt, but it still held. It still looked like the thing I'd built with my own hands. I didn't know if the county would repair it fast. I only knew that, for the first time in months, Karen's power to treat my work like a toy had an expiration date on it. A paper notice, a company policy, and a reporter's promise. I slept that night with the sound of the creek in my ears. And a I hadn't had in a long time. The trap hadn't snapped on her or anyone else. It had simply made the truth visible, in daylight. In bright color where people could see it and judge for themselves. And Karen hates daylight. She thrives in gray corners and whispered promises. If she wanted to challenge me again, she'd have to do it in front of everyone, and I'd be ready. A week passed quietly, too quietly. No trucks, no arguments. No early morning rumbling of diesel engines rolling toward the creek. Karen had gone silent. But silence was never her style. When she went quiet, it meant something was building behind those closed blinds and HOA newsletters. I kept repairing what I could. Replaced a few cracked planks, tightened bolts, reinforced the center beam. The bridge still held, but the weight limit had to be respected. The county's inspection tag still hung bright yellow against the post, unsafe for heavy vehicles. Every time I passed it, I felt that mix of pride and warning. I thought maybe it was over. I was wrong. It was Saturday. The sky was blue, the air smelled of pine and river mist, and I was finally enjoying breakfast on the porch when I heard it again. That deep, vibrating growl of an engine. I set my coffee down and looked up the lane. There she was. Karen standing at the edge of the road, waving her hand like she was directing traffic again. Behind her, not one, but two cement trucks, idling, exhaust curling into the morning air. My heart sank, then tightened into anger. After everything, the inspector, the cameras, the warning signs, she still came back. I walked down toward the bridge slowly, phone in hand, camera already recording. My neighbors noticed too. Doors opened. A few stepped out with their phones ready, whispering, "She's really doing it again." Karen shouted across the lane before I could even speak. "I have clearance from the county now." Her voice echoed like a challenge. I called back, calm but sharp. No, you don't. That's a lie. The bridge is community property, she snapped. We voted last night. HOA approved it. The crowd laughed, soft but disbelieving. Even the drivers looked uneasy. I said, the HOA can't vote on private land, Karen. It's not yours. She ignored me and waved again. The first truck rolled forward. That's when it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for. The trap. Not a dangerous one. Not something that could hurt anyone. Just something that would make the truth undeniable. Earlier in the week, I had installed a simple system. Bright orange construction barriers under the bridge deck. Designed to collapse into the water if a vehicle heavier than a pickup tried to cross. They weren't strong enough to damage anything. Just loud and messy enough to make a scene. The first truck moved onto the bridge. The planks creaked, and the sound echoed across the water like thunder. Then, CRSK! The center slat of the barrier gave way and dropped, splashing into the creek with a loud crash. Water sprayed up. The driver slammed on his brakes, heart racing. The truck stopped dead halfway across. Karen screamed, "Keep going." The driver shook his head violently. No way. The second truck braked hard, tires screeching. Everyone froze. Even the birds went quiet. I walked forward, camera steady. Voice calm. That's what happens when you don't listen. The bridge held, no one was hurt, but the entire scene was caught perfectly. The trucks, the crack, the water splash, the panic. And then came the sound that ended it all. The faint whoop of sirens from down the road. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. The same county inspector returned, this time with 2 deputies. They pulled up, stepped out, and walked straight toward Karen. One of them asked, "Mom, were you informed this bridge was under restriction?" Karen lifted her chin, fake confidence trembling. "I have community rights." "He's lying about ownership." The inspector handed the deputy a folder. Property deed, private maintenance permit, and county restriction. All signed. Karen blinked. That's not possible." The deputy turned to her, calm but firm. "Mom, you've been warned before. You instructed commercial vehicles to cross private restricted property after official notice. That's criminal trespass and endangerment." The words hit her like a wall. No. I was just. You told those trucks to cross, correct?" The inspector interrupted. She didn't answer. Cameras caught it all. The neighbors filming, the driver still pale. The orange barrier still floating in the creek. The deputy spoke again, slower this time. "Mom, we're going to have to ask you to come with us." The look on her face, disbelief melting into panic, was the moment every neighbor would talk about for years. She turned toward me. "You set me up," I said softly. "No, Karen. You set yourself up. I just made sure everyone could see it." They read her rights as she protested, claiming harassment, claiming conspiracy, claiming everything except the truth. But the truth didn't care. The truth was recorded, bright and sharp, under the summer sun. And the cement trucks reversed carefully, one after another, mud splattering on their tires as they backed away. The inspector directed them out. The deputies placed Karen in the cruiser gently, firmly. One neighbor whispered, "About time." Another clapped once, half in disbelief. As the police car drove off, the entire street stood in silence. The creek below bubbled quietly. The bridge steady in the sunlight, still standing, scarred but undefeated. I looked at it and smiled. Not because she was gone. Because justice had arrived, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth and sunlight. Later that evening, the local news ran the story. The footage showed everything. The signs, the warnings, the trucks, the collapse, the arrest. The anchor's voice was calm, factual. Authorities confirmed the bridge was privately owned and restricted. HOA member Karen Wilcox has been charged with trespass and reckless endangerment after ignoring official county warnings. My phone buzzed all night. Neighbors, old friends, even strangers messaged, saying they'd watched it, that it felt good to see someone finally held accountable. But the message that meant the most came from the inspector himself. He texted one line. "Nice engineering on that safety barrier." Loud, but effective. I laughed, because it was true. The next morning, I stood at the bridge again, hammer in hand, tightening the bolts for real repairs this time. The air was still, the creek calm. I replaced the old sign with a new one, clean, clear, and shining in the light. Prairie Bridge. Race TOR rigid IT. Neighbors waved as they passed. Cars slowed cautious now. No trucks dared. And across the creek, Karen's house sat quiet. The blinds closed. The lawn empty. Maybe she'd move. Maybe she'd stay. I didn't care anymore. The bridge didn't either. It had spoken once, loud enough for everyone to hear. 2. That's the thing about boundaries. If you protect them quietly, people call you difficult. If you protect them loudly, they call you dangerous. But when you protect them right, with patience, evidence, and sunlight, the truth ends up doing the work for you. I didn't destroy her reputation. She did that herself, with every truck, every lie, every arrogant word. All I did was build a bridge, and she showed the world how far she was willing to go to break it. In the end, it wasn't the wood or the nails that taught her a lesson. It was the one thing she never expected to face: accountability. And as I watched the sun rise over the creek, reflecting off that repaired bridge, I realized something simple and perfect: sometimes the best trap you can set is the truth.